Just because he's your dad or your brother or anyone doesn't mean you have to love them. You don't have to be friends with them. You don't have to do anything. If someone's going to kick you when you're down, you have the right, no matter who they are, to walk away and be okay with it.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Jordan Murphy, and welcome to another episode of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Conversations about the defining moments that shape our lives. Today's episode is sponsored by Audible. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't have the time, or should I say I don't make the time anymore to read books. You know what actually I've come to discover is that I'm more of an auditory learner. I like to listen to stuff more than I like to read it, and the listening to it seems to sink into my thick skull better than reading it. So anyway, what I'm saying is I do have time to listen to books when I'm not enjoying a podcast, of course, and I love me some Audible. Maybe you guys have heard of audible.com. Basically, it's the new improved version of books on tape. Got it on the interweb, available for you. So for a limited time, you can try Audible and get 2 free audiobooks. You just visit my website, breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com, and follow the link on the homepage to take advantage of this sweet deal. This episode is also brought to you by Amazon Fresh. Now, if you're like me and you have a busy schedule, you got kids and you've got sports practice and rehearsals and play dates and school pickup and drop off, and you don't have a nanny or a staff, and you have a job to go to, then Amazon Fresh could be the answer. I mean, it's the answer for me. It's super easy. It's super convenient. So skip the checkout line and have fresh groceries delivered to your door. This is a limited time offer. You just got to visit breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com to get the $25 off your first order using Amazon Fresh. Click the Amazon Fresh link and get your $25 off your first order using Amazon Fresh. The excerpt at the beginning of this episode just scratches the surface. Several years ago, I ended up talking to a very good friend who happens to be my guest today and felt like I was talking to a shell of a man. Somebody who was broken and had bottomed out. And to speak to him today and to have spoken to him a couple weeks ago and asked him to come on this show is the reason I invited him on the show. He has literally been able to reinvent himself and bring himself back from the pit of despair. I don't mean to laugh, but it's extraordinary to me how he has literally picked himself up again. My guest today is Steve Truitt. This man has a very diverse set of skills and a background. He has hosted multiple TV shows, including Discovery Channel's Cool Stuff and How It Works. He has been a newscaster with local affiliates, worked with Fortune 500 companies such as Tesla, produced a documentary, authored a book, and is a certified NLP life coach. Oh, and he's also a father to 2 amazing kids. Steve, what haven't you done?
Slept, apparently.
Well, thank you for making time out of your busy schedule, because I know you've got lots going on as usual. But I'm super pumped, man, that you're with me today. We've talked about doing this interview for a while with both of our schedules. Trying to figure it out has been, fun as usual. Yeah. But thank you.
No, it's my pleasure, and thanks for having me on, Jordan. Always great to talk to you.
And you know what? That's really the thing, though, right, Steve? I mean, you and I, honestly, I think I even told you this when I had the inspiration, I was moved to start this podcast. It came out of the experience I've had having conversations with people like you and other friends, where I'd be on the phone with people and I'd get off the phone and I would feel totally lit up, totally alive, because we were having these really amazing, authentic, life-inspiring conversations. And I thought, I want to record this.
Right. I had the same response, Jordan, and you and I get so busy with our lives, and we've been friends for a long time, but I feel the same way. And every time you call or I call you, it's going to be 45 minutes to an hour, and you're going to walk away feeling like you lost a few pounds and you slept for a week. I mean, you just feel really good.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about you, Jordan, and I'm going to let your listeners get a little insight into you, is that you're the kind of guy, and this has actually happened, where you could call me up and say, look, be at my house at 5 p.m. on Saturday, and trust me, I'm not going to tell you what it is, and I'll show up. And we've actually done that before. And it's always worth my time. So, you've earned that trust, and you're a good guy.
Thanks, Brady. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So let's chat a little bit. Obviously, the subject of the show is breakthroughs and the breakdowns that tend to precede them. And, you and I have, we're not old guys, but we've been around the block. Right. we've lived some life. I mean, you and I have spent many years working as on-camera talent. We are, I'm sharing this as these are things we have in common, and we sure. both, have been married, have kids, have had our victories, and we've had our breakdowns.
Sure.
And, you've had an incredible story as of, let's call it the last 3 years. Is that?
I think going on 5.
5? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm off. So
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. I just remember, just a little quick insight is to the fact that when I met you, you were married, you had your 2 beautiful kids. And unfortunately, since I've known you in that last 5 years, you've had a divorce.
Right.
And my experience when you went through that it broke my heart. And if it broke my heart, I know you were devastated.
Yeah.
And to get onto the other side of it, when you shared with me where you were and where you are now, I thought, this is the conversation I want to have. Now, you may want to share something else, but why don't you tell me what you want to share?
Sure. Well, just so your listeners get a little bit of perspective, I met and married my ex-wife within the same year, 2003. And without a lot of backstory, which I'll get to later, my marriage was essentially the culmination of the previous 38 years of my life lived under the rule of what I would call an extremely narcissistic father and brother. So I was the youngest of 3, and the women in my family, my mother and sister, were pretty much absent in the family. And my father was an extremely dominant, self-important narcissist. There's just no other way to put it. Borderline personality. And this is all stuff I've come to discover just in the last 5 years. But I was raised under the thumb of him and my brother, just brutal cruelty toward me. I was a sensitive kid. I was the kid in the family. I was the only person in the family who played music, who told jokes, who enjoyed life or tried to enjoy life, who enjoyed engaging with other people. The other side of my family, not so much. Just not people who really garner a lot of friendships and just a lot. They're bullies, essentially. And so when I was young, I didn't realize any of this. I just thought I was crazy and I was wrong all the time.
You just thought that was actually normal and how it was supposed to be.
I guess I just put it on me. Like, I must be wrong. Like, they're constantly telling me not to do this, not to do that. That's stupid. This is wrong. Don't do this. Don't be this. Right. When I told my father when I was in high school, I wanted to go to NYU and be a filmmaker. And he spent an hour, with me. Usually when he spoke to me, I was trapped somewhere in a car or on a boat or something. And he would just say, here's why this is wrong. And I'm going to pound this into you and you're going to get this. And so I just listened to him and I ignored virtually every aspect of myself that was myself. And I just learned to tuck away my instincts throughout my whole life. So around the time I was 26 or so, I'll try to get to this quick. I was working for the World Wrestling Federation in Stamford, Connecticut. I was writing for their newsletter, and the entire team got laid off. This is in the early 90s. And I thought, I'm just going to go to California and see what happens. And really what that was to get away from my father and brother and to see what my life was like. So I came out here and immediately got into broadcasting, first in radio, then into television. And my career really started to thrive. And I was doing great. And I was on the TV and I was doing weekend traffic and weather and I was doing breaking news in a helicopter and I had my own radio show. And then I started getting hosting gigs on Discovery Channel and Nat Geo and everything was great. And I thought, well, now I'm ready to settle down. And I met my wife through a friend. And in the beginning, she was extraordinary. She just pulled me right in like a moth to a flame. And I thought, this is just the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. She's so much fun, and she's this, and she makes me feel great. And I married her as quickly as I could. And within 4 months of getting married, we were pregnant. And it all just felt like, okay, this is, moving away from New York was the smartest thing I ever did. Within a matter of a few years, I had started to realize that I had made a huge mistake, that the woman I married was essentially a manifestation of my dad, someone who will just reel you in with personality, and once they've got you, completely dismantle you psychologically. And this woman is the mother of my children, and I want to give her as much respect as I can. But in terms of how she is and what she chooses to do as a person, her choices within our marriage were awful. And she chose to demean me and put me down and block my career to the point where I gave up on television to try to make her happy. She put down every single friend I ever had to the point where I got rid of my friends just so I wouldn't have to hear her trash them, behind their back. And it was just this slow dismantling of everything that I held dear in my life. And by the time my marriage ended, 9 years later, if you can believe that, I had 2 kids at that point. I was a shell. I was a nothing. I had nothing. My career was gone. I couldn't find work. My only resume was TV stuff. It was 2009 at that point.
Oof.
The economic collapse had happened.
Right.
And I remember telling her near the end of our marriage, saying, look, I've given up on you lifting me up, being nice, being a partner, but please just stop putting me down every day. And that's where my marriage had gotten to. And it was other things. I had financial ideas for us, and I had built a small, amount of money for myself. And once I got married, that disappeared. And she was a spendthrift, and she didn't want to save. And she insisted that we buy a house at the top of the market and then sell at the lowest point, which is just the worst thing you can do. And because I was so methodically trained by my father to ignore my instincts and serve someone else who I gave the power to, I did everything she wanted. I gave her everything she wanted, and it virtually, without killing me, destroyed every aspect of my life, including my career, my happiness, and then eventually my marriage.
Right.
And I'll just tell your listeners the truth. By the time that it happened, we were so separate that we were not faithful to each other. But I was the one that got caught not being faithful. And because of that, she took that advantage to then kick me out of the house and drain what was left of our bank account, and completely malign me to everyone in our family and friends, to the point where it was just this huge smear campaign. And that went on for a couple of years after, and court battles, and it's still to this day going on. We're still having issues because I somehow, for some reason, chose the one person that was the absolute worst for me and my sensibility.
So let me just quickly refresh on the timeline here. So you were married 9 years. You divorced in around 2009.
2012.
No, you divorced in 2012.
Or 13, rather. 2013, yeah.
You divorced? Okay.
In 2009, that's when my career ended, essentially.
Okay, got it. So 2013, the marriage dissolved.
Right.
And you were left, like you said, not shallow, sorry.
Empty.
Hollow, empty.
Yeah. I chose not to go back to the house. Yeah.
Right. And you were kicked out, and you were like, she had drained the bank account. I mean, you were at zero or below zero.
Well, I wasn't working at the time.
Right.
I had savings, and I was actually, I was working with clients at the time, and I was making money, but I was funneling all that money to her so she could keep the house and the kids.
Right.
And I was living, a friend of mine had an art studio in Venice, and I was living in the upstairs loft on a couch. And I was there for a month, Jordan. I didn't, I would sneak into maybe a Y or something to shower, but I mean, I couldn't see my kids. I allowed her to create that narrative. And I can go into that, what happened.
Okay. I mean, for anybody listening to this, it's easy to hear just the pit of despair. I mean, like, this is psychologically, emotionally crippling, potentially. It's like, how do you dig yourself out of that? Like, what steps do you take? Because you have an option, you have a choice, right? I mean, honestly, there's so much to be discussed here, right? There's so much to be discussed in the sense that there are things that I recall specifically, like milestone moments in my life where something happened that I came to terms with about my mother, for example, that transformed my relationship with women in a way that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't come to terms with that reality. Right. Now, when it comes to this situation, you had to come to terms with the fact that you had unconsciously recreated your relationship with your father as your wife. Now, when did you realize that was even the case?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll quickly answer it. And I want to do a little bit of backup as well, just so we get the whole point here. I realized that as I've been divorced 5 years, it probably didn't really hit me until last year.
Wow.
This is how deep down it went. And so let me describe what it was like that first month. I'll do it really briefly. I had lost everything. I was not allowed to see my children. I had no home. My entire family knew about the affair because my ex made sure that everybody in my town, everyone in my family, all of my friends, everyone knew about it. She just was relentless. And what could I say? I decided not to fight back. I didn't defend myself. I just sulked off to a corner. And I lived in that little studio loft for a month, staring at the walls daily, wondering, how did I get here? I had everything. I had a career. I had everything. And it just completely was gone. And I remember, Jordan, this was my lowest point. This is what changed it for me. I remember sitting there one day and I was thinking, I have life insurance. And if I just drive off the Vincent Thomas Bridge and make it look like an accident, then my kids will get the insurance and then somebody will benefit from this. Oof. And that's how low I got because I was considering that. And
like you were worth more dead than alive.
Yes. And that was the result of as I put it, the systematic dismantling of me by someone I gave the power to do so.
And that's the biggest part of this, which I think it's great that it's such a slippery slope or a tightrope walk because someone like your ex-wife hurt you so badly, it would be very easy to make her 100% wrong. Mm-hmm. And yet it sounds to me like you're working through the reality that it takes two to tango.
Oh, I opened the door.
Yes. And you unconsciously created exactly what you were used to.
Right.
And it's devastating, but it's one of those things where somebody listening to this or somebody who doesn't realize it yet, that's what I'm praying somebody will hear if they listen to this, is most of what gets us into the most trouble is what we can't even see.
Right.
But what's
we don't allow ourselves to see.
We don't want to see it.
Trained not to see it. In my case, I was trained like a soldier to completely ignore any bit of my own self-interest and serve some dominant person. Mm. First, it was my dad, and then it was my wife. The turning point for me was the first one was I went down to San Diego to see a friend. I'll never forget this. His name is Chris Kelly. And I was down there for a couple of days and I'm staring off on the beach and I said, I don't know when I'm going to see my kids. I miss them and my life is falling apart. And he said to me, sometimes when your life is falling apart, it's actually falling into place. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking to myself, someday that will make sense to me and I'm going to hang on to that. But for now, I'm going to feel bad. I let that sink into me for literally years. And so that was the starting point for me. I drove back to LA and I got myself back on my feet and I found a new job. I got a place. I had 3 goals: find a job, get a place to live, get my kids back. And I did all of that within a few months. And the reason I was able to do it successfully, Jordan, and this is what I want to answer your question with, is because I didn't have my ex standing over me, stopping me from being great. Uh-huh. And before I met her, I built a 15-year TV career. When I meet her, it's destroyed. Right. After she's gone, I built myself back up. Without her in my life, I was able to be the person that I always was. And that's when the revelation hit me, because of the result of the successes from my hard work of literally reinventing myself, building myself back up from nothing, starting a brand new career in clean energy, something I'd never done before, never sold before. I wanted to be a trainer for the company. And they said, well, yeah, but you got to sell first. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I was walking around neighborhoods, knocking on doors, selling solar for commission only. And that's how I got started. And within 9 months, I was head of training at the company. But the ability to do that and to rise to the level where I am now and get back to where I am now on this level playing field is strictly, completely 100% me, and has nothing to do with anybody else who was an influence on my life, because I now don't have that influence in my life anymore. And I have even said to my ex, if you wanted to control me, you should have stayed married to me, because otherwise now I'm going to continue my life as it should have been.
So let me ask you this. You said that you did this on your own, which is admirable and fantastic. Did you do anything? I don't know whether it was. Did you do therapy? Did you do anything? Any tools that you took on, or was it just blood, sweat, and tears?
It was both. You know me pretty well, and for your listeners, I'll just give a brief description. I'm certified in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. Please forgive the door slam there.
That's okay.
And neuro-linguistic programming essentially is the mind's ability to reconstruct events, memories, and feelings through language. Yep. And so you can change your mind pretty quickly in an unconscious level. And so I always subscribed to that. But in this case, I had never met anyone who was as effective at teaching it as I was, and you can't teach yourself. So I decided to go back to, and I know that sounds a little arrogant, but I did feel that way at the time. And I decided to go back to traditional therapy. So I found this woman who is in Torrance, and I called her and I said, I'm in a pit, and it's a nuclear bomb pit, and I can't get out. And she said, come see me and I'll get you out. And it was a lot like being in a pit that first year. It just felt like I was in this hole. I had to get out of this deep hole. It took me about a year before I even felt like I'd gotten back to ground level.
Got it. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I used to say that I felt like I was underwater drowning, and I just wanted to get my head above the water. That's how I explain it. You were in a pit, I was in the water. Either way around it, you're feeling suffocated, buried, and oftentimes paralyzed.
Yeah.
And having an inability to find a way to rebirth yourself. And I guess what I'm wondering also is, was there like a aha, or was there an epiphanic realization that you had about yourself that, most of what I think about when I think about neuro-linguistic programming and my somewhat limited knowledge of it is that you're replacing old programming with new programming. Mm-hmm. And that old programming is usually disempowering programming. It's usually old conversations that we learned to protect ourselves or to survive, essentially. And now we're saying, oh, I'm identifying that. Oh, I'm not good with money. I'm never going to be successful. Money is scary. Money is unpredictable, for example, right? And then to flip the script, essentially, to say, I'm great with money. Money is always great with me. Money comes to me. Money flows in. Money flows. However you want to recreate the story. So, because that's all it is, right? All that we do is a story that we make up. And was there something, and I'm saying this sounding super confident, but I'm only saying it that way because I've experienced it that way. Not to say that's the only way, but that's how I've experienced it. And I'm wondering, over there with you, was there something specific that had you turn that corner?
Yeah, there was. And it was another sad event, but it was almost like I could say it was the last sad event in my family, the last oppressive event. I'll tell you briefly. It was 2 years ago, Christmas time, so maybe 2.5 years now. My father, I have worked very hard to keep a good relationship with my dad, despite how difficult it was to be his son, particularly, and how he treated me. But, my nature is to look for the best in people. And certainly with your father, you want to have that relationship if you can. So we kept a pretty civil and nice relationship as long as I kissed his butt enough. He's felt great about that. So one Christmas, his third ex-wife commented on a picture I posted on Facebook of my children. Just an innocent picture like, hey, we're having fun. And she commented, "You're such a good dad. It's too bad you didn't have a good example." Now, I didn't even know that post was there, or rather that comment was there. The next morning, I got an email from my father saying, "I saw your post on Facebook. How could you be so terrible to me? And I knew you never liked me, and how, to tell the world all this, it's none of their business."
Also, you posted a photograph and somebody else commented.
Correct.
And then he made it about you doing that to him.
Exactly. That's
Perfect.
Exactly right.
Perfect.
Now, let me add to that. Not only did he send me this, but he CC'd my brother and sister on it. And
they have no idea what's really going on. They're getting his story only.
Right.
Right.
So you can already probably see no wonder I drove into that ditch again with my marriage. This is what he did my whole life, was to separate me from my brother and sister because I was different. And so I went on to Facebook, saw the posting, and I was just like, oh my God. And, I wrote back and I tried to explain, hey, I had no idea this existed till you brought it to my attention. I've just deleted it. And I told your third ex-wife to not post things like that again, but I never knew about it. And he wrote me back, with my sister and brother CC'd. "She claims you did, and one of you is not telling the truth." And that was it for me. I thought, you know what? That's the last time I'm going to allow myself to suffer that kind of abuse and sweat someone like that, even if it's my father. And my friend said to me years ago, and it sunk in around that time, just because he's your dad or your brother or anyone doesn't mean you have to love them. You don't have to be friends with them. You don't have to do anything. If someone's going to kick you when you're down, you have the right, no matter who they are, to walk away and be okay with it.
Yeah.
And that was the point for me, Jordan. That's when I looked back and I saw, my God, of course that's why I married this woman. Of course that's why I give away my power at work. Of course that's why I allowed, other people to walk all over me, or why I'm too nice, or why I'm not great at confrontation, or any of the other things that I have suffered through in my life, because I was trained to be that person by someone who didn't want me to be big. He needed me to be small because I was a brighter, shining light than he was, and he hated that. So he had to snuff it out. And it was that moment, that experience, that changed everything. That's when I realized it all. It all became so clear to me. And ever since then, first of all, I've never spoken to him since and never will.
Got it.
And I have had a completely different relationship with my ex-wife. She remains difficult and dramatic and problematic. And I just go, I'm sorry to hear that. The answer is no. Or yes, the kids will be there at 5. I just don't engage. And I don't feel bad, and I don't feel threatened or scared. It's amazing.
Well, that's fantastic. And I'm wondering, so you basically pulled the plug on your relationship with your father. And I can't help but ask whether or not you have been able to forgive him.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
And I say that only because if there's still something sitting there that he has over you in any way, shape, or form, even if you're not in communication with him, if there's any resentment there, that's power over you.
Yeah, no, I get that. And, I want to expand on that just a little bit.
Yeah.
I always used to wonder about forgiveness and how you could do it, because there's always so much pain left behind. There's always a scar. And what I have found is that if you disconnect from someone emotionally, then forgiveness is part of the package, because you're not carrying anything. And I think what bothered me so much about trying to constantly win over my father's love was that I was trying to win over my father's love. And I know myself very well. And I know that the second that I actually disengage from you, that's it. It's over. I will never be back emotionally, because I put so much love and emotion into everything I do, to my work, my friends, everything. So if I pull that plug, it never comes back. And so I was scared to do that. I was afraid to disconnect from my father emotionally. But once I did, suddenly I'm like, okay, I never have to talk to him again. Of course I forgive him. He's also a maniac and an idiot. And he had plenty of opportunities and he blew it. And that's his problem. And I have no feeling around it whatsoever. He's also a brilliant writer, a great storyteller. there's a lot of great things about him. There's a lot of terrible things about him. None of them have to do with me anymore. Right. And because I've disconnected emotionally, I don't need to forgive him. There's just no feeling around that.
Right. Got it. Cool.
Does that make sense?
It does. And honestly, at the end of the day, as long as you're left feeling complete, whole, then that's, I guess, what I'm aiming at.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking, essentially.
Sure.
And, we haven't even addressed the fact that the good news on the other side of this is you're happily married now.
I'm almost married. I'm going to get married soon. Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah,
you just proposed.
I just got engaged.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew there was something major.
Yeah. And listen, for the first 3 years of my divorce, 3.5 years of my divorce, I didn't date. I took every minute to focus on either my children or me, to figure out what I did wrong, what I could learn from it, and how I could best take care of my kids. And then when I was ready, I asked one friend. She had one friend, and we hit it off. And she is the product of my hard work, not the product of my father's abuse. And she's a phenomenal woman. She also has 2 daughters. So now we all live together. There's 6 of us in the house. Oh. It's me, my fiance, and 4 kids, 4 daughters.
Wow.
And it's incredibly joyful. It's often agonizing because there's so much drama in the house, but it's good girl drama. It's not like I hate you drama or you're a loser drama. It's, I can't find my... You took my brush. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah,
I have daughters.
That's great drama.
I understand.
Yeah, that's good drama.
It's good drama. Now, I'm always wondering when I talk to guests if there's anything that they prescribe, I guess, or suggest as to how to navigate these ups and downs, these peaks and valleys that as human beings we're going to experience. Yeah. And you can either go through them and stumble through them and hope to get on the other side, or you can have some sort of structure or system or plan, however you want to phrase it, that helps you to navigate it with perhaps more power.
Yeah. Look, that's a tricky question. It's a great question and it's a tricky question. The reason is, each one of our brains receives information differently and soothes differently. And so for some, it's meditation. For some, it's boxing. For some, it's a movie. For some, it's arguing. It depends. But I will say this, for everyone, this is a secret that I found, is that you have to make everything in your life okay. You have to choose everything in your life powerfully, and that includes the bad. And this is why I'm really veering off something like Facebook. It's because it propagates false happiness and doesn't say, hey, I'm having a bad day. Right. And you have to love the downs as much as the ups, or you're not going to love your life. You've got to realize that if you're up there and you're having a phenomenal day, that's not going to be the way it is tomorrow. If you're having a ridiculously horrible day and everything's going wrong for you, that's not the way it's going to be tomorrow. Yeah. And you have to understand, like the stock market, there will be ups and downs and ups and downs. But if you're open to change and to growth and into improvement, then little by little, you'll see a return on your investment. And that's what life is. It's the aggregate of your experiences. Yeah. It's not the momentary happiness or misery that you think you're feeling.
It really isn't. I also, what I hear, at least what I'm hearing from me, is the reminder to be gentle with yourself, to be patient with yourself. And it's funny you actually said, some days you're going to have days you're down, some days you're going to have days you're up, and sometimes there's just no rhyme or reason. And no. I mean, for example, today I was like feeling off balance, not particularly joyful, let's say, right? Yeah. And I couldn't figure out why I was feeling off. And so what am I doing? I'm focusing on why I'm feeling off, right?
Right.
And now I'm feeling more off because I'm focusing on being off, and now I'm trying to fix being off. And then I said, wait a minute, how about you're just feeling off? Mm-hmm. And that's it. Stop adding anything to it. Stop dwelling in it or trying to fix it. And another one, like you said, we all kind of do different things, whether it's taking a walk on the beach, meditating, boxing, writing, what have you. For me, one of them is usually getting over there with someone else, like having a conversation.
Right.
And listening to someone else, what they're up to, get over in their world. It gets me out of my dangerous neighborhood that is my mind. and so
That's right.
I was looking forward to this conversation because I'm like, okay, I know that I'm not going to be focused on what I'm focusing on for the last 4 freaking hours.
Right. That you're off.
Yeah. That's no longer what I'm up to. And I'm also, I have so much to be grateful for. And so I'll write a gratitude list, and still I finish that gratitude list and I'm like, fuck.
Well, Jordan, I have a tip for that.
Yeah.
Can I share this?
Yeah.
And this goes back to the I'm fine with what happens conversation. Every year, most people make New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to work out, whatever it is. And to me, I think that's a trap because it's a fix for what you think is broken. Mm-hmm. So you're already coming from, this is wrong, I got to fix it. So that's why people give up after 3 months, because the wrong kind of catches up with them, because that thinking stays there. Every year on New Year's, I create a theme for the year, and I challenge myself to master the theme. And I know I'm going to screw up for the first 3 months, but it's not like I give up. It's that I get better over the year. So several years ago, my theme for the year was, I'm fine with what happens. Do you know what year that was? That was the year I got divorced.
Good year to have that theme.
Yeah. And believe me, I barely made it through the year. I was trying as hard as I could. That was a challenging year. One year.
You're presencing yourself to an intention.
Yeah, exactly right. What I'm doing is I'm pulling myself forward toward the intention and toward the theme instead of trying to fix what I think may be broken. Yeah. This year, my theme is listening. So I usually come up with it sometime around Christmas, and it feels right. I'm like, okay, that's going to be my theme. And on January 1st, I just put that intention in my head. And what's occurred for me in the last 6 months of this year is that there is so much that I haven't listened to. My own gut, my advice from my partner or from my children, signs out there in the universe. Maybe you're not going in the right direction. Whatever is happening, I am unconsciously and consciously focusing on being a better listener to the rhythm and the messages of the universe. And it's turning out really interesting because one of the problems, and again, listening is not a fix for me, but one of the problems I had from day one to 5 years ago was I never, ever, ever listened to my gut, ever. And when I said, hey, we shouldn't buy a house in the top of the market, that's not the place and time to do it. And my ex-wife said, we have to have a house now. And I'm like, okay, right? So I never trusted what I knew was right.
Yeah.
That's all changed for me. And it's culminated in this year where I'm really listening to my gut.
I think that and this is for everybody, I think we all can stand to listen to our gut, our intuition, whatever you want to, that sixth sense, whatever you want to call it, right? Is that if we don't practice listening to it, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter, and you have to literally kind of search for it again. You have to listen closer for it again to build that muscle back up again. And I tell my kids now, I'm like, when you feel something, and I say, if you don't feel like you should be somewhere, you shouldn't be there. Like if you're at someone's home or at a party or, rather than trying to figure out how my kids can be protected, I just say, listen, it's pretty simple. If you're someplace and you get a feeling that you shouldn't be there, you shouldn't be.
Yeah, go.
Trust
it's okay. You owe nobody anything.
That's right. Trust that. And I want my children to have that kind of skill set that you and I are now at, in our late 40s going, we should probably do that a little more.
Yeah, that would help. That would have helped a while ago. No, I agree with that. And I think, to be the ability for me to be a better father as a result of this divorce, being so worried about how the divorce would affect my children has turned out, I think, to be such a good thing for them to have two perspectives, because they're still with their mother half the time, and their mother enjoys putting people down for fun and manipulating and controlling people because it makes her feel bigger. And again, I'm not trying to trash her. I'm stating a fact. This is who she chooses to be. I've tried for her to not be that way. This is who she needs to be or chooses because of her own journey. I wish she wouldn't be. I've always hoped that she would find her way out of it, but she's choosing not to. Yeah, so that's that.
Got it. Now, I'm wondering, it's just a kind of a question for maybe a new track here, first of all, I want to just highlight the fact that where you were and where you are now are distinct. Who you are in relationship is distinct. It sounds like you really showed up in this relationship transformed, a new person than you were in your previous relationship. Fair enough to say?
That's right. It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is such a profound transformation. That's what I would consider a paradigm shift. You're not who you were in that first marriage.
No, I don't recognize who I mean, I don't think the old me would understand or recognize the person that I am now with the inner insight and the depth of knowledge I have of my own choices and everything. No.
Now, I'm wondering, is there something about yourself that you used to view as weak or shameful, and that now you actually take pride in it?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And that is, look, I'm a deeply sensitive person. And I don't mean like I get my feelings hurt if you say my ears are big. I mean, I feel pain and other people's sorrow, and I connect with those who suffer, which is why I was led to coaching, which is why I think I'm a good parent, which is why I'm a good partner. And that, I used to get brutally teased by my father, who called me a woman when I was a kid. And we'd go sailing with my brother and my father, and I was trapped on this boat for a week. And he'd go down in the galley, woman, and make us dinner. And that's the way I was raised. I was raised to hate the best part about myself, and to be shamed for it. And that was, of course, reinforced in my marriage as well. Again, I allowed it. But getting out of that marriage, my fiance now is a woman who so appreciates that depth and often needs it, right? She's in a high stress job. She is a complex woman herself. She's a very deep person. She needs someone to understand that depth. And, Joe Q. Public's not going to be that guy for her. I'm someone who can really get her, and she appreciates it so much. And my sensitivity is so valued, not just by her, but by me as well. I've really come to love it about me. I think it gives me a dimension that I just so appreciate.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, do you think that you're the kind of person who says yes to something even when you have no idea how you're going to get it done?
Yeah.
Or do you
know that
no,
I am.
Or do you say no to things because you have no idea how you're going to get it done?
No, you know that I'm the yes guy. We both learned the John F. Kennedy story of, he said, if you want to get over a wall, throw your hat over and then you'll figure out a way.
That's right.
So I've always lived my life that way. However, I will tell you that in my listening year, where I'm learning to listen, I will say no to things that don't fit that don't best serve me or my family.
Sure.
So I can opt out of things powerfully and say, no, that's not right for me, and be okay about it.
Yes,
but
that's because you've actually weighed it out. You've made a conscious choice to see how it best serves you, your family. Is it empowering? Sure. Is it disempowering? As opposed to doing it because many people won't engage in tasks because they either don't think they can do it, or don't think they can figure it out, or need to feel that they have to figure it all out before they do it. That's what I'm talking about. And you and I share that experience. I mean, when I started doing this podcast, I literally had no idea what I was doing. So
you're doing great.
Oh, thanks, dude. But yeah, literally, I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. Great. Let's go to University of YouTube. And that's what ended up happening. What would you say is something about yourself that people who are close to you would be surprised to learn?
Oh boy, what a great question. Did I see this one coming?
I don't know.
Be surprised to learn.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
You have a little thing, something about you that you don't wear on your sleeve.
Yeah, you're right. I am a pacifist person, nonviolent. I'm not non-confrontational in the way that I wither. I will, fight the Verizon person if they overbuild me, whatever it is. I'll say, let me talk to your supervisor. Right. But I think one thing that someone probably wouldn't recognize in me or expect to see from me is if there were a moment where my family was threatened, I could very easily transform into the Karate Kid and just completely take someone down.
Yeah.
And do it in such an effective way that they wouldn't get up for a long time. Like I've got that within me. I've never used that power. It has often frightened me because I know I've got it within me.
Yeah.
It's never been tapped. But if anyone ever threatened in any way someone I love or myself, you would see a completely different and possibly frightening person.
It is amazing what the Papa Bear mentality does bring out. I think Mama Bear, Papa Bear, whatever, either one. But I have a similar experience of that. I'm not a confrontational. I don't look for fights. I'm not going to back off if confronted. But when it comes to the idea of feeling like someone who's close to me is being threatened, I can feel the hair on the back of my neck go up, and I have to clock myself sometimes. How am I going to engage in this? How responsibly am I going to manage?
Oh, and by the way, the first thing you'll probably do, and the first thing I would do is say, look, let's de-escalate this. That doesn't have to go anywhere.
That's right.
Because I'm terrified of what will happen if it goes somewhere, because I won't lose that fight. I guarantee you.
Honestly, that's a part of it. That's the part of it that it is a fear. You're like, I want to be able to talk this out. And honestly, if I can't talk it out, I'm going to try to humiliate them verbally.
Right. I mean, or you make a joke, because I can be funny.
Right.
I can try to be, funny my way out of it if I can do that.
That's right. And see if that works. Maybe they'll back off.
Yeah.
But yes, I completely hear that. And you're right. That is something that I would be surprised to learn about you. Like if I found out you just came unhinged and,
yeah, and look, it's not like I'm going to sit up in a clock tower with an AK. I mean, that's not me, right? At all.
I get it.
But yeah. I mean, I just don't come off that way, and I'm not that way. But I know that that's in there. Like it's like the Hulk. You push me over the side of a cliff, I'm going to come.
Don't
up
make
green.
me angry.
Yeah, don't make me angry.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
It's that simple.
It is that simple. Well, it's such a great story, I think, of just a victory, man. A victory for you, for your kids. I mean, that in and of itself, man, for your kids to come out on the other side of this with you doing the healing that you did and are doing, because you and I both know it's a work in progress and it's not ever over until we stop breathing, right?
Yeah. And I would say too, Jordan, just one quick thing, really quick. I would say to your listeners too, it could be very easy for me to just place blame everywhere. And I know that I did lay out the reasons why I am the way I am, with my father and then my ex-wife. But if you're not taking responsibility for your part in it, you're not gonna grow. There's just no way, unless you can have that meta perspective. That really is the only way to find peace in your life, is to say, you know what, that was also on me. And if you can do that, it just takes away so much pain and blame and resentment and everything else.
Well, because there's nothing you can do about what someone else is doing or has done. You can't. Yeah. All we can do is manage who we are and how we respond in the world, or how we clean up our side of the street. And and it cannot happen unless you are taking 100% responsibility. And that, for many people, is terrifying. And is very unattractive, because it's much easier to make other people wrong and be right about that.
That's right.
And but then you kind of have then you have to say, how's that working out?
Yeah.
How are you doing over there with that philosophy? And if you're doing okay and you're feeling alive and invigorated and living your life full of passion and joy and love, okay, I'm wrong. But if you can really look at your life and not be taking 100% responsibility and wonder why things are going terribly wrong, well, you're not being honest.
Right.
You're just not being honest.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm saying this from my own experience. I mean, over 5 years ago, I was terrified to admit that I had a drinking problem. Mm-hmm. Terrified. Shame and fear and anxiety. Yeah. I mean, you name it, right? Depression, all of it. But I kept on doing it, and I kept on wondering, why aren't things changing? And then, like you said, you were talking about like listening, what I put in front of me was integrity, the concept of integrity. You and I both know you don't have integrity, you practice it. It's something you live day in and day out, and sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. It's fleeting. And what I realized was that the integrity and the conversation of having integrity was this huge octopus on my face that was drinking. And I couldn't get away from it, but I had to own that and admit that I had a problem. And so, but I hadn't for years and years and years and was miserable. So, yeah, I'm saying that because I've experienced what it is to not take responsibility.
Right.
That's why I'm clarifying that. You know, I feel sometimes like, you know, I don't have a degree. I'm not an author of books. I'm not, you know, like a doctor of something. But so I want to qualify what I say sometimes because I feel like I say it with such confidence, like I know something. Because to a certain degree, I have had that experience. And I can see what's worked for me, and I can share that with you, and I've shared that with other people in interviews. And it's a common thread. It's just a common thread to take responsibility for your life.
Yeah, and it is the harder path, but and there's more burdens involved with that because you're not going to get as much support. Yeah. You're not going to get as much agreement. You know, there's fewer people that take responsibility than don't, and so you're in rare company and rarefied air, and it's lonelier there. But you know what? If you got to get up every day and look in the mirror and you know that doing that is better for you, you have no choice. It's the red pill or the blue pill, right?
And honestly, I really do believe that initially it's scary. Initially, you have to rally new troops around you. Mm-hmm. But I believe, and my experience has been, that if you stay the course, you will attract the people around you who support you being your best self. Right. Not just you, but it does have to start with just you. Mm-hmm. And then others will get, oh, that's what he's up to. And they'll ultimately, ideally, line up and reflect that back to you. And those who don't, you let them go.
Right.
You let them go.
And that's the thing we were talking about before, whether it's your parent or your sibling or whomever, if they're not serving what your, not interests are, but what your, where you're coming from and what your energy level is and what playing field you're on, right? If they're not matching you, then it's okay to let them go. You can mourn them, you can do whatever you want, but if you're hanging on to people because you're afraid to lose them for whatever reason, that's no reason to keep a friend because they're not a friend anyway. If someone isn't constantly lifting you up, supporting you and being there for you, then what's the point? There is no point. I've gotten rid of so many people, including family members, who would rather put me down and keep me small so they can feel better. And that's just not the way I'm going to live my life anymore. I'm not going to be small for anyone else ever again.
Well, amen to that, brother.
Yep.
Well, Steve, thank you so much, man. I mean, you and I say this with almost every interview I do. We could go on and on.
Right. Yeah.
And
you're great to talk to, Jordan. Always so easy.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. And right back at you. Well, I do thank you for taking some time with me, and good luck with all the writing. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're working on next.
Thank you.
And everybody else, stay tuned for more episodes of Breakthroughs with Jordan Murphy. Check out my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com. Stay connected on Instagram at Breakthroughs with Jordan and Twitter at Jordan D. Murphy. And again, today's episode is sponsored by Audible.com and Amazon Fresh. Check out those promotional giveaways on the front page of my website. And if you have a great story to share, as I'm sure many of you do, go to my website at breakthroughswithjordanmurphy.com and shoot me an abbreviated version of your story to my email. I'll give it a read and maybe share a couple of them on the show.